Why is she here? Someone hissed as the wedding doors opened, and every laugh died when the valet announced the name Daniel never wanted spoken again. Before we dive into this story, I need to know something. Have you ever been invited somewhere just so someone could feel superior to you? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever felt like dignity matters more than revenge, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 months earlier, Elena Wright stood in line at a Walmart in Columbus, Ohio, counting bills in her hand like they might disappear if she didn't keep track. $20.40.63. That was it. The cashier waited patiently while Elena slid a few items aside. Brand name cereal replaced with generic, ground beef swapped for frozen chicken. She smiled politely, the way you learn to smile when pride becomes expensive. You're good, the cashier said gently. Elena nodded. Thanks. She pushed the cart outside into the late afternoon heat, the parking lot shimmering under the sun. Around her, engines started, kids complained, phones rang. Life moved forward with or without grace. She loaded the groceries into her 10-year-old sedan and sat there for a moment longer than necessary. This was not how she pictured her 40s. Once, she'd been Mrs. Wright, the woman beside Daniel at charity dinners, the one who remembered names, sent thank-you cards, stayed quiet during negotiations, the woman who believed building something together mattered more than owning it alone. That woman didn't exist anymore. The apartment Elena lived in now was small but clean. Second floor, thin walls, a window that faced another brick wall instead of the skyline she used to wake up to. She unpacked groceries slowly, moving carefully around the ache in her lower back, an ache she ignored most days. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A notification. She didn't check it right away. Experience had taught her bad news waited patiently. When she finally looked, her breath caught. Daniel Wright and Charlotte Myers invite you to celebrate their union. A wedding invitation. Cream paper. Gold lettering. A venue she recognized instantly, one of the most exclusive estates outside Napa Valley. Her hands trembled. Not from longing. From disbelief. She laughed once. Short. Hollow. Of course, she whispered. Daniel always did enjoy a final move. Across the country, Daniel stood in front of a full-length mirror in a luxury condo overlooking San Francisco Bay. His suit was tailored perfectly. Navy. Sharp. Expensive. Charlotte adjusted his cufflinks, smiling. You okay? Yeah, he said. Just thinking. He checked his reflection again. Everything about his life looked right. The company had gone public. The wedding guest list sparkled with investors, city officials, and old rivals who now shook his hand. And then there was Elena. He'd added her name himself, ignored Charlotte's hesitation. It's the mature thing, he'd said casually. Closure. But alone, Daniel smiled. He imagined Elena arriving alone, out of place, watching what she'd lost. He told himself it wasn't cruelty. It was balance. Elena stared at the invitation long after sunset. She thought about declining, about saving herself the pain. But something inside her resisted. Not anger. Resolve. The past 2 years had been quiet ones. Hard. Honest. She'd worked 2 jobs, learned how to stretch a dollar, learned how to sleep without someone beside her. Daniel had walked away with the house, the company, the friends. She walked away with herself. Barely. She placed the invitation on the table and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. Memories surfaced instead. Daniel laughing as he signed papers. Daniel saying, "You wouldn't survive without me." She turned onto her side and stared at the dark. Was this an invitation or a test? The next morning, she called her sister, Marisol. "You don't have to go," Marisol said immediately. "I know. So why are you considering it?" Elena paused. "Because I don't want to spend the rest of my life running from rooms he thinks I don't belong in." Silence. Then softly, "I'll support you. Whatever you choose." Elena RSVP'd yes. Her finger hovered for a second before clicking submit. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. Meanwhile, Daniel toasted champagne with colleagues, joking about seating arrangements. "She'll sit in the back," he said lightly. "If she even shows." They laughed. Daniel did too. But later, alone, he felt something unfamiliar tug at his chest. Uncertainty. He ignored it. Weeks passed. Elena prepared quietly. She didn't buy a new dress. She altered an old one, did her own hair, saved where she could. Not for appearances, for strength. On the morning of the wedding, the sky over Napa was flawless. White chairs lined the lawn. Music floated through the air. Guests arrived dressed in silk and confidence. Daniel stood near the altar, radiant, certain. Then the valet stepped forward, cleared his throat, and spoke a name that did not belong to the past. Daniel believed this day would confirm his victory. But the moment Elena arrived, everything he thought he controlled was about to turn against him. The music softened as the limousine rolled through the iron gates. Not a stretch limo. Not flashy, but black, polished, quiet. The kind that didn't announce wealth, only certainty. Guests turned before they realized they were staring. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped. The limo eased to a stop near the stone steps leading to the vineyard lawn. The driver stepped out first. Then he opened the rear door, and Elena stepped into the light. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. She placed one heel on the gravel, then the other steady and calm, as if she'd arrived exactly where she was supposed to be. Her dress wasn't designer. No obvious labels. Deep blue, tailored perfectly to her frame. Simple lines. No apology in it. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders. Natural. Untouched by trends. She held no clutch. No jewelry beyond a thin silver bracelet. She didn't need armor. A murmur moved through the crowd like a breeze through tall grass. "That's her. I thought. She looks different." Daniel heard it all. From the altar, he watched the scene unfold, his smile stiffening by degrees. This wasn't how he'd imagined it. This wasn't small. This wasn't awkward. This was composed. Charlotte leaned in. "Daniel? Who is that?" He swallowed. "My ex-wife." Charlotte's brow furrowed. "She came in a limousine." Daniel didn't answer, because suddenly he didn't understand anything anymore. Elena scanned the crowd once. Just once. She spotted familiar faces, former friends who'd stopped calling, women who used to compliment her hosting skills while watching Daniel's ambition with open hunger. She felt no sting, only distance. She walked forward, the sound of her heels steady against stone, each step grounding her further. Daniel stepped off the altar platform without realizing he'd moved. "Elena," he said, forcing warmth. "You came." She stopped at a respectful distance. "You invited me." Pause. Not hostile. Not warm. Just honest. "I didn't think." He cleared his throat. "I didn't know if you would." She tilted her head slightly. "Neither did I." Charlotte watched them, her smile polite but tight. "I'm Charlotte." "Elena," she said, extending her hand. Charlotte hesitated just a beat too long, then shook it. Her hand was cool, controlled. Elena released it gently. "Congratulations," she said. "It's a beautiful day." She meant it. That unsettled Daniel more than anger ever could. Guests pretended not to stare. They failed. Elena moved toward her seat, third row, aisle. Not hidden. Not front and center. Balanced. As she sat, she felt eyes linger, curiosity sharpening into discomfort. She breathed through it. She'd survived worse than glances. Daniel returned to the altar, but something had cracked. The narrative he'd rehearsed, the silent victory, the subtle humiliation was gone. Elena hadn't arrived diminished. She'd arrived whole. As the ceremony began, Daniel struggled to focus. The officiant spoke about partnership, respect, choosing one another again and again. The words felt heavier than they should. Daniel's gaze kept drifting. To Elena. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, listening, not watching him. That stung. A flash of memory hit him. Elena at their old kitchen table, reading contracts he'd brushed off, You should slow down, she'd said once. You're afraid of success, he'd replied. He shifted his weight. The past had a way of showing up uninvited. During the vows, Charlotte's voice trembled with emotion. Daniel responded automatically. Applause followed. Guests smiled. But under the surface, something had changed. At the reception, wine flowed freely. Laughter returned. Music filled the space between tables. But wherever Elena stood, the air felt different. Not tense. Aware. She accepted a glass of water from a server and stepped outside toward the edge of the vineyard. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft gold. For the first time since arriving, her hands shook. Just a little. She let it happen, then stilled them. Behind her, footsteps approached. Elena! She turned. Daniel, I didn't expect you to come like this, he said, gesturing vaguely. I mean, prepared? She offered. He exhaled sharply. Yes. She studied him. Why did you invite me, Daniel? He opened his mouth, closed it, because the truth, to prove I'd won, sounded ugly in daylight. I thought it would be respectful, he said finally. She nodded slowly. I see. He waited for accusation. It didn't come. That was worse. I hope you're doing okay, he added, almost defensively. I know things were tough. Elena smiled. Small. Genuine. They were, she said. And then they weren't. Daniel stiffened. What does that mean? She met his eyes. It means people don't stay broken forever. Silence stretched. The vineyard hummed with distant conversation. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Elena, he said carefully, how did you? She raised a hand gently. It's not a conversation for today. He bristled. I'm just curious. She lowered her hand. So were you, when you signed the divorce papers without reading the fine print. His breath caught. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't accused. She'd stated a fact. Daniel laughed, sharp and forced. You always did love drama. She didn't respond. She turned back toward the crowd. That was when it hit him. This wasn't about embarrassment. This was about control. And he didn't have it anymore. Across the lawn, whispers grew bolder. That's his ex. She looks confident. Did you hear she came in a limo? Speculation bloomed. Elena felt it brush against her like static. She didn't flinch. Charlotte joined Daniel, lowering her voice. Why is everyone talking about her? Daniel watched Elena laugh softly at something an older guest said. I don't know, he admitted. Charlotte frowned. She's not supposed to be the story today. Daniel didn't answer, because for the first time he realized maybe she always was. A server passed with champagne. Elena declined again. She wanted clarity, not blur. As the evening deepened, a familiar face approached. Mr. Harlan, Daniel's earliest investor. Elena, he said warmly. It's been years. She smiled. It has. I had no idea you'd be here, he added. Daniel never mentioned. Some stories are easier to forget, she said gently. Harlan chuckled, then grew thoughtful. You know, when Daniel first pitched the company, it was you who convinced me he'd succeed. Her brow lifted slightly. I did. You spoke about people, sustainability, trust. He shook his head. Rare things. Daniel watched from across the lawn, unease turning cold. Elena thanked Harlan and stepped away. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A message. Driver, I'm nearby. Just say the word. She typed back. Not yet. As night settled, lanterns flickered to life. Music softened. Guests drifted toward the dance floor. Daniel stood alone at the bar, drink untouched. He stared at Elena, at how comfortable she seemed, at how little she needed from him. And for the first time he wondered, what had she built while he was busy tearing her down? There are moments when we watch someone reclaim themselves, not loudly, not cruelly, but with such quiet strength that it forces us to confront who we've been. If you've ever witnessed that kind of reckoning, you understand why some stories deserve to be followed all the way through. Daniel set his glass down. He walked toward Elena again, this time slower, more careful. "Elena," he said, "we should talk." She looked at him. Really looked. "Not tonight," she said softly. "Tonight belongs to your future." Then she turned away, leaving him standing there. The band struck a new song. Applause rose. Laughter followed. But beneath it all, a question pulsed through the air. If Elena wasn't here to be humiliated, then why had she really come? And what did she know that no one else did? As the limo's headlights flickered on at the edge of the property, Elena took one last look at the celebration behind her. Not with sadness, with clarity, because tomorrow the truth would no longer stay quiet. And Daniel's carefully planned victory was about to collapse under the weight of what he never saw coming. Daniel thought the invitation would weaken Elena, but as whispers grow and questions sharpen, he begins to fear the truth she's carrying may destroy everything he's built. The morning after the wedding, Daniel woke up with a dull pressure behind his eyes. Not a hangover. Something heavier. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Charlotte had already left for an early meeting, leaving a note on the kitchen counter that read, "We'll talk later." Daniel stared at it longer than he should have. Then he folded it once and slid it into his pocket, like postponing the conversation might shrink it. He poured coffee and leaned against the counter, scrolling through emails on his phone. 3 unread messages from investors. 2 from his assistant. 1 from an unknown number. He ignored the last one. His mind kept drifting back to the vineyard, to the way heads had turned, to the look on Elena's face. Calm, steady, unreadable. She hadn't needed to say much. Her presence had done the work. At the office downtown, the building buzzed with its usual rhythm. Glass walls, polished floors, the quiet confidence of money moving fast. Daniel liked that feeling. It reminded him he was still in control. "Morning," his assistant said, trailing behind him. "There's talk." He didn't slow down. "About what?" "The wedding." Daniel stopped. People rarely talked about his personal life at work. He'd made sure of that. "What kind of talk?" he asked. She hesitated. "About your ex-wife." His jaw tightened. "What about her?" "They're saying she's connected to Harlan's new venture." Daniel turned. "That's not possible." His assistant lifted her shoulders slightly. "That's just what's circulating." Circulating. Like smoke. He waved it off and stepped into his office, closing the door behind him. Elena hadn't worked since the divorce. At least not in any way that mattered. She'd taken consulting gigs. Non-profits. Small things. That's what he'd told himself. She hadn't built anything. She couldn't have. Daniel opened his laptop and pulled up market reports, forcing his focus onto numbers. But the numbers blurred. Instead, memories surfaced. Elena sitting on the floor of their first apartment, papers spread around her, explaining tax structures he hadn't cared to understand. Elena staying up late, proofreading his pitch decks while he slept. Elena reminding him to slow down, to think long-term. He'd called it hesitation. He'd been wrong. Across town, Elena stood in line at a small coffee shop on Main Street, the kind that knew its regulars by name. "Same as usual?" the barista asked. She smiled. "Please." She paid, then took a seat by the window. Outside, people passed by with dogs, briefcases, strollers. Ordinary lives moving forward. She took a sip and exhaled. She hadn't slept much either, but her exhaustion felt lighter. Purpose has a way of doing that. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. We need to talk." She didn't reply. Instead, she opened a folder on her tablet labeled Final Review. Inside were documents she'd read a dozen times already. Contracts, timelines, names. Daniel's name appeared often, not as the lead, as the risk. Back at the office, Daniel tried to bury himself in meetings, but his confidence wavered. He spoke too quickly, interrupted too often, missed details he'd normally catch. "Are you good?" one partner asked after a meeting. Daniel forced a smile. "Just tired." The partner nodded, unconvinced. By afternoon, the whispers grew louder. Someone mentioned Elena's name in the hallway. Someone else stopped talking when Daniel walked past. He felt the shift. It wasn't hostile. It was curious. And that scared him more. He finally opened the message from the unknown number. Unknown number. This is Harlan. Call me. Daniel stared at the screen. His heart thudded once. Hard. Then again. They met at a quiet restaurant near the river. The kind where deals happened over salads and silence. Harlan didn't waste time. I didn't realize you and Elena were no longer speaking, he said. Daniel stiffened. We're divorced. I know, Harlan replied. I just didn't know how separate your worlds had become. Daniel frowned. Why does that matter? Harlan folded his hands. Because she's part of my next investment. Daniel's breath caught. In what capacity? Partner, Harlan said simply. The word landed heavy. That doesn't make sense, Daniel said. She doesn't run companies. She builds them, Harlan corrected. Quietly, Daniel shook his head. You're mistaken. Harlan watched him closely. You sound like you used to. Daniel bristled. Excuse me? Confident, Harlan continued. Certain you see the whole picture. Daniel leaned back. I do. Harlan smiled sadly. That's what worries me. They parted without resolution. Daniel walked back to his car in a daze. The city felt louder, brighter, less stable. Elena hadn't just moved on. She'd moved ahead. That night, Daniel sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The skyline glowed outside the window. He opened an old email thread between him and Elena. One he'd never deleted. Her last message read, I hope one day you understand why I had to walk away. He'd never replied. He typed now. We need to talk. Then deleted it. Across town, Elena stood in her apartment, barefoot on the hardwood floor. It wasn't big, but it was hers. She unpacked a small box she'd brought back from storage. Old photos, a few keepsakes. She paused at one picture. Daniel and her years ago laughing on a road trip. Windows down. Music loud. She set it aside. Not with anger, with acceptance. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He would confront her. Not emotionally, strategically. He drove to the nonprofit office where she volunteered, another detail he'd learned through whispers. She wasn't surprised to see him. You shouldn't be here, she said calmly. I need answers, he replied. She studied him. You want reassurance. He scoffed. I want the truth. She nodded. Those are rarely the same thing. They sat across from each other in a small conference room. No glass walls. No audience. Just two people who knew each other too well. Are you working with Harlan? Daniel asked. Yes, she said. Why? He demanded. She took a breath. Because he listened. Daniel laughed bitterly. I listened. She met his gaze. You heard. You didn't listen. Silence filled the room. You're doing this to get back at me, he said finally. Her expression softened. If that's what you need to believe, I can't stop you. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're ready for. Daniel stood abruptly. You think you're better than me now? She stood too. I think I'm no longer waiting for you to see my worth. The words cut deeper than he expected. He left without another word. In the hallway, his phone buzzed again. Charlotte, we need to talk. Tonight. Daniel closed his eyes. The walls were closing in. That evening, Charlotte confronted him with questions he couldn't dodge. Why didn't you tell me about Elena's involvement with Harlan? She asked. Because it didn't matter, he snapped. It matters now, she said. People are asking if this affects our future. Daniel felt anger flare. Everything I've built is solid. Charlotte looked at him carefully. Then why do you seem so afraid? He had no answer. Later that night, Daniel sat alone again, staring at the city. For the first time, he allowed the thought to surface. What if I was wrong? Not about the divorce. About everything after. Elena, meanwhile, prepared for a meeting that would change everything. She reviewed notes, rehearsed key points, steadied her breath. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Denial has a way of making noise when it's about to break. Daniel felt it cracking. He just didn't know yet how loud the fall would be. Daniel keeps telling himself Elena is a passing threat. But as her influence grows and his certainty fades, circumstances will soon force them closer than either of them planned. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Daniel stared at the email on his screen, reading it again even though the words hadn't changed. Joint Strategic Summit, Hudson River Conference Center. Mandatory attendance for all primary stakeholders. Primary stakeholders. That was the problem. Elena's name sat just below his. He leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Of all places, of all meetings, it had to be this one. 2 full days. 1 building. Shared panels. Shared meals. No avoiding her. No pretending she didn't exist. Daniel almost declined. Almost. But absence would look like weakness. And weakness, he told himself, was not an option. The Hudson River Conference Center sat just outside the city, glass and steel pressed against the water like it belonged there. Elena arrived early. She liked arriving early. It gave her time to breathe, to observe, to settle into the space before it filled with noise. She checked in, accepted her badge, and took a seat near the windows overlooking the river. The water moved slowly, steady and indifferent. She found comfort in that. When Daniel walked in, he felt it immediately. The shift. Not dramatic, not obvious, just awareness. A few heads turned. A few conversations paused. Nothing rude, nothing loud. Still, he felt exposed. Then he saw her. Elena sat with her notebook open, pen resting lightly between her fingers, eyes focused on the stage schedule. She hadn't noticed him yet. Or maybe she had and simply chose not to react. That possibility unsettled him. The first panel began with polite applause. Talk of growth, sustainability, long-term vision. Words Daniel had used for years. Words that suddenly felt thinner. Elena spoke halfway through the session. Not long, not forceful, but clear. She spoke about risk the way someone does when they've lived with it. Not feared it, not chased it, but understood it. Daniel caught several people nodding. One man leaned over and whispered to another. Daniel didn't need to hear it to know who they were talking about. During the break, coffee lines formed. Elena reached for a cup at the same moment Daniel did. Their fingers brushed. Brief. Accidental. Both pulled back. Sorry, Daniel said automatically. It's fine, she replied. They stood side by side, waiting for the machine to finish. Silence filled the space. Not awkward. Heavy. You didn't tell me you'd be presenting, Daniel said finally. She glanced at him. You didn't ask. He frowned. You knew I'd be here. Yes, she said. That wasn't why I came. He didn't know how to respond to that. They moved into the next session together, drawn by the same schedule. Assigned seats. No choice. Daniel sat to her left, close enough to feel her presence without touching. Close enough to remember how familiar it once was. As the speaker droned on, Daniel caught himself watching Elena instead of the stage. She took notes sparingly, asked sharp questions, listened more than she spoke. She hadn't changed. She'd sharpened. At lunch, seating was prearranged. Their table included Harlan and 2 other executives. Conversation stayed professional, polite, but every now and then, Harlan directed a question at Elena instead of Daniel. Each time, Daniel felt it like a small bruise. You two know each other well, one executive remarked casually. Daniel smiled tightly. We were married. Elena didn't correct him, didn't add anything. The truth sat between them, unspoken. After lunch, a storm rolled in. Not dramatic, just rain. Steady and gray. The river darkened. The schedule shifted. Outdoor sessions moved inside. People clustered in hallways. And suddenly, space felt limited. A facilities manager apologized. Some rooms are flooded. We're consolidating sessions. Daniel checked the updated agenda. The final workshop of the day, one he was scheduled to co-lead, had been moved. Same room, same table, same partner. Elena. They stood across from each other at the head of the room. Daniel adjusted his jacket. We should align our talking points. She nodded. Agreed. They leaned over the table reviewing notes. Professional. Controlled. But every now and then their eyes met, and something old flickered. not affection. History. The session went smoothly. Too smoothly. They complimented each other's points without trying. Finished each other's thoughts without realizing it. The audience noticed. Daniel heard the murmurs afterward. You can tell they've worked together before. Strong dynamic. Interesting energy. When the room emptied, Elena gathered her papers. Daniel lingered. Elena, he said quietly, can we talk? She hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. They stepped into a quiet hallway, the hum of conversation muffled behind closed doors. This wasn't supposed to happen, Daniel said. She folded her arms. What wasn't? This, he gestured between them. Us being here, like this. She studied him. You invited me to your wedding. That was different. She raised an eyebrow. Was it? He exhaled. I didn't expect you to be this involved. She softened slightly. I didn't expect you to still underestimate me. The words weren't sharp. They were tired. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me what you were building? She answered without hesitation. Because every time I tried to build something with you, you treated it like a distraction. Silence. The hallway lights buzzed softly. I was under pressure, he said. I was trying to make something of myself. So was I, she replied. I just didn't need an audience. That landed. Their 5 minutes stretched. Neither checked the time. Finally, Elena stepped back. I should go. Wait, Daniel said. Dinner. The group dinner. I know. No, he clarified. I mean just us. We should talk without. He gestured vaguely. She considered him. Really considered him. Then shook her head. Not yet. And walked away. That night, the rain intensified. Dinner was held inside a long room with tall windows fogged by condensation. Assigned seating again. Daniel and Elena ended up across from each other. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel everything unsaid. Wine was poured. Elena declined. Daniel noticed. He always noticed that. Conversation drifted. Someone asked about past projects. Elena mentioned one Daniel recognized. You worked on that? He asked. She nodded. I led it. You never told me. She met his gaze. You never asked. Again. That phrase. After dessert, people lingered. Small groups formed. Harlan excused himself early. The room thinned. Daniel found himself standing beside Elena near the windows. Rain streaked down the glass. The river moved on. You look different, he said quietly. She glanced at him. So do you. He smiled faintly. You look steady. She considered that. I feel steady. He nodded. I don't. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. Outside, thunder rumbled. The lights flickered briefly. Someone laughed nervously. Then the power went out. Just for a moment. Darkness swallowed the room. A collective intake of breath. Emergency lights kicked in seconds later. But in that brief dark, something shifted. Daniel felt it. So did Elena. When the lights returned fully, she stepped back. I should head to my room, she said. He watched her go. Didn't follow. Didn't stop her. But something inside him loosened and something else tightened. Later, alone in his room, Daniel stared out at the rain-soaked night. He replayed every moment, every word, every silence. He realized something then. Being near Elena didn't weaken him. It stripped him of excuses, of certainty. Across the hall, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, shoes off, notebook closed. She hadn't planned to feel anything. But proximity has a way of reopening doors you thought were sealed. She stared at the rain. And for the first time in years, she wondered, what would happen if the truth finally came out? The storm didn't stop overnight. Neither did the tension. Because tomorrow they would be closer still. And the past, once held at a distance, was about to step fully into the light. Forced into the same space, Daniel and Elena can no longer avoid what lingers between them. But as walls crack and memories surface, the truths they buried are preparing to break free. The rain stopped before sunrise. The quiet it left behind felt louder than the storm. Daniel woke early, staring at the ceiling of the conference hotel, his mind already racing. The walls felt closer than they had the night before. He showered, dressed, and checked his phone. No messages. Not from Charlotte. Not from Elena. That unsettled him more than noise ever could. Elena woke at the same hour. She sat on the edge of the bed, feet on the carpet, hands resting in her lap. The morning light came in pale and cool, softening the room. She breathed in slowly. Today mattered. Not because of Daniel. Because of the truth. The final day of the summit began quietly. No rush. No music. Just coffee, papers, and people moving with purpose. Daniel arrived early again. He chose a seat near the back, away from the stage. When Elena entered, he felt it instantly. The room seemed to orient around her. She wore a light gray jacket, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back, focused, not guarded, resolved. The main session opened with updates on future investments. Harlan took the stage. He spoke calmly, hands resting on the podium. Our next move, he said, requires trust, patience, and leadership that values people as much as profit. Daniel shifted. Elena didn't. Harlan continued. I want to introduce the architect behind this vision. He stepped aside. Elena Reyes. The room applauded. Not politely, earnestly. Daniel felt his breath catch. Elena walked to the podium without hesitation. She didn't smile. She didn't rush. She began. I grew up watching smart people get overlooked, she said. Not because they lacked talent, but because they lacked access. The room stilled. I learned early that systems don't change themselves. People do. Daniel listened, unable to look away. She spoke about building quietly, about choosing long roads over shortcuts, about walking away from places that refused to see her value. Her voice stayed steady, but her words carried weight. I believe success should leave room behind it, she said. Room for others to stand. Applause rose again, stronger. Daniel's chest tightened. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. After the session, people gathered around Elena. Questions, compliments, introductions. Daniel stayed back, watching. Each laugh felt distant. Each smile felt earned. Harlan approached Daniel. You should be proud, he said. Daniel looked up. Of what? Harlan met his eyes. Of knowing her. Daniel didn't answer, because pride wasn't what he felt. Regret was. Later that afternoon, the schedule cleared early. The summit ended ahead of time. People checked out. Cars pulled away. The building slowly emptied. Daniel found Elena near the riverwalk behind the center. She stood alone, hands resting on the railing, eyes on the water. He approached quietly. She didn't turn. I didn't know, he said. She nodded. I know. I didn't know how much I missed, he continued. She turned then. Her face wasn't angry. It was open. That's the hardest part, she said, realizing what could have been seen if someone had just looked. Daniel swallowed. They stood side by side. No space between them. No touch either. Just air. And history. You never told me why you really left, he said. She exhaled slowly. I did. You just didn't hear it. I thought you were giving up on us. She shook her head. I was choosing myself. That landed differently now. Daniel stared at the water. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid that if I slowed down, I'd lose everything. Elena studied him. And did you? She asked softly. He didn't respond. The answer hurt too much. Silence settled. Long. Necessary. I didn't come to the wedding to embarrass you, she said eventually. I came because you invited me, and because I needed to know if I could walk into a room where I was once invisible, and still stand. Daniel nodded. You did more than stand. She smiled faintly. I know. He turned to her. Elena, I'm sorry. Not rushed. Not defensive. Just true. She absorbed the words. Didn't accept them yet. Didn't reject them either. I don't need an apology, she said. I needed acknowledgement. He nodded again. This time he understood the difference. They walked back toward the building together. Slow, unspoken understanding growing between steps. Inside, Daniel's phone buzzed. Charlotte. He looked at the screen. Didn't answer. Elena noticed. You should take that, she said. He shook his head. Later. She didn't push. In a quiet lounge near the lobby, they sat. No agenda. No structure. Just two people letting old truths surface. I blamed you for my failures, Daniel said. That was easier than admitting I ignored the best part of my life. Elena's eyes softened. You weren't failing, she said. You were succeeding in the wrong direction. He let out a breath that sounded like relief. And grief. You don't owe me forgiveness, he said. I know that. She nodded. And you don't owe me admiration. A pause. Then she added, but honesty matters. He met her gaze. I'm scared, he said, of what I lost, of what I might still lose. She considered him. Fear doesn't make you weak, she said. Refusing to face it does. Outside, the river moved steadily. Inside, something shifted. There are moments when truth doesn't arrive like a storm, but like a tide, slow and unavoidable. If you've ever watched someone finally face the cost of their choices, you know why walking away from stories like this feels impossible. Staying matters. Witnessing matters. Sometimes, simply choosing to keep listening is an act of accountability. Daniel stood. I don't know what happens next, he said. Elena stood too. Neither do I, she replied. But I won't hide anymore. He nodded. That was fair. They parted at the doors. No promises. No declarations. Just clarity. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Charlotte hadn't come home. He didn't blame her. He opened his laptop and reviewed contracts he'd ignored for years. He saw things differently now. Risk, control, power. None of it meant much without respect. Across the city, Elena packed her bag. She paused at the window looking out at the lights. She felt lighter, but exposed. Because the truth, once spoken, demands action. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Decisions. Fallout. Neither of them could undo the past. But they could no longer pretend it didn't matter. As Elena zipped her bag, her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. We need to talk. Urgently. She stared at the screen. Her heart tightened. Some truths don't heal. They break things first. With truths finally spoken and masks stripped away, Daniel and Elena stand exposed, unaware that the next revelation won't just challenge their past, but threaten to end everything they're only beginning to understand. The call came before sunrise. Elena answered it from the kitchen, standing barefoot on cold tile, one hand wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Yes, she said quietly. She listened. Her shoulders stiffened. Then she closed her eyes. I understand, she said. Send it to me. The line went dead. Across the city, Daniel woke to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. He reached for it, already irritated. By the time he read the first message, irritation gave way to dread. Board emergency meeting, 9 a.m. Mandatory. Another message followed. Subject: conflict of interest review. His name. Elena's name. Together. The drive downtown felt longer than usual. Traffic pressed in. Horns blared. The city felt unforgiving. Daniel's thoughts raced ahead of him, jumping to worst-case scenarios he refused to fully name. At the boardroom table, faces were tight. No small talk. No coffee. Just papers spread out like evidence. A lawyer cleared her throat. We need to address a concern regarding transparency, she said. Specifically, your past relationship with Elena Reyes. Daniel's jaw clenched. That relationship ended years ago. That's not the issue, another board member said. The issue is disclosure. Daniel leaned forward. There was nothing to disclose. She wasn't involved in my work. A pause. The lawyer slid a document across the table. She is now, she said. Daniel's chest tightened. Meanwhile, Elena sat in a conference room across town with Harlan and two attorneys. Her hands rested flat on the table. Steady. But her stomach twisted. The board believes Daniel may have influenced early decisions without proper disclosure, one attorney said. They're considering freezing both parties out until this is resolved. Elena frowned. Daniel had no involvement in this venture. That may be true, Harlan said gently. But perception matters. Elena looked down. So this was the cost. By noon, rumors spread. Fast. Emails leaked. Calls went unanswered. Stock tickers dipped. Nothing dramatic. Enough to be noticed. Enough to hurt. Daniel tried calling Elena. Once. Twice. Straight to voicemail. He left no message. He didn't know what to say. They ran into each other by accident in the courthouse lobby that afternoon. Both had been summoned separately. Both looked surprised. Then guarded. Elena, Daniel said. She stopped. So this is happening, she said. He nodded. They think. I know what they think, she interrupted. It doesn't matter what's true anymore. He stepped closer. I didn't do this. I believe you, she said. That should have comforted him. Didn't. They sat on opposite ends of a long bench, waiting. No touching. No reassurance. Just the hum of voices and footsteps around them. Daniel finally spoke. I never wanted this to touch you. She looked at him. It already did. The meeting was short, cold, clinical. A decision deferred. More reviews. More distance. Outside, the sky darkened. Storm clouds rolled in again, low and heavy. Daniel stood under the courthouse awning, watching rain begin to fall. Elena, he said quietly, this is my fault. She shook her head. It's not about fault. It's about fallout. He turned to her. Then let me fix it. She met his eyes. You can't. The words landed hard. What do you mean? He asked. She hesitated, then said it. I'm stepping away. His breath caught. From what? From the venture, she said. From everything tied to you. No, he said immediately. You can't do that. This is your work. And this is your reputation, she replied. One of us shouldn't have to lose everything. He stared at her. Why are you doing this? She answered softly. Because I've already walked away once. I know how. Rain soaked the sidewalk. People rushed past. Daniel felt frozen. You don't owe me this, he said. She nodded. I know. That hurt more than anger. He stepped closer, voice dropping. If you do this, it ends us. Whatever this is. She swallowed. I can't build something new by reopening old wounds, she said. Not like this. So that's it? He asked. We finally tell the truth. And it costs us everything? Her eyes shone. Yes, she said. Sometimes it does. She turned away before he could say more. Daniel watched her disappear into the rain. He didn't follow. He couldn't. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Lights off. City noise muffled. He replayed every decision. Every dismissal. Every moment he chose control over care. Now control was gone. And care came too late. Elena packed up her office the same night. She didn't cry. Not yet. She moved slowly, deliberately, box by box. Each item felt heavier than it should have. When she locked the door behind her, the hallway echoed. She paused. Let herself feel it then. The loss. Not of Daniel. Of possibility. Daniel's phone buzzed. Charlotte. He answered this time. I can't do this anymore, she said. I don't know who you are when you're not winning. He closed his eyes. I understand, he said. She hung up. The rain fell harder. As if the sky had something to say. By morning, headlines hinted at separation. At instability. Daniel read them without reacting. Something in him had gone quiet. Elena boarded a train out of the city. Not far. Just enough to breathe. She stared out the window as buildings gave way to trees. She thought about the woman she'd been. And the one she'd become. Both had paid a price. There are moments when everything you've fought to protect collapses at once. When doing the right thing feels indistinguishable from losing. If you've ever let someone go because you believed it was the only way to keep them whole, you know this kind of ache. Have you ever lost someone because you were too afraid to fight? Comment below. Daniel stood in his office later that day, signing documents that shifted power away from him. Each signature felt like surrender, but also relief. He didn't know who he'd be after this. Only that the old version couldn't survive. Elena stepped off the train into quiet. She breathed in, let it out. She didn't know if she'd made the right choice. Only that she'd made an honest one. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it's just the beginning of goodbye. Everything has fallen apart. Careers strained, hearts broken, paths divided. But in the silence left behind, both Daniel and Elena are about to face the hardest question of all. Who are they without the walls they built to survive? Daniel left the city before dawn. No announcement, no driver, just a full tank and the highway stretching west. The radio stayed off. He wanted the quiet. He wanted to hear his own thoughts without noise pushing them aside. The skyline faded in the rearview mirror. Glass gave way to trees. Concrete softened into open road. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from him. And that terrified him. He pulled off near a small town just after sunrise. A diner sat by the road, neon sign humming awake. He parked, stepped inside, and took a booth by the window. Coffee arrived without questions. He stared at his hands wrapped around the mug. They looked older than he remembered. Daniel thought about power, how he'd chased it, protected it, used it like armor. He thought about Elena sitting at their kitchen table years ago, asking him to listen. He remembered dismissing her without meaning to hurt her, believing intent mattered more than impact. He'd been wrong. Miles away, Elena walked a gravel path behind a rented cabin near a lake. The water was still, the air cool. She moved slowly, breathing in pine and damp earth. She hadn't come here to escape pain. She'd come to face it without interruption. She stopped at the edge of the dock and sat. No phone, no notebook, just space. For the first time since the summit, she let herself feel the full weight of what she'd given up. Not the work, the future she'd glimpsed and set aside. Daniel finished his coffee and paid in cash. He drove again, farther this time, until the road narrowed and the landscape opened into fields. He pulled over, stepped out, and stood there with nothing to do. No calls, no meetings, just him. He walked through tall grass that brushed his knees. The morning sun warmed his shoulders. A wind moved through the field, bending stalks in the same direction. He followed it, not knowing where it led. His shoes picked up dust. His breath slowed. He noticed small things. The sound of insects, the smell of earth, the way his chest rose and fell without effort. He remembered nights he couldn't sleep because his mind wouldn't stop. He remembered mornings when he woke already behind. Here there was no ahead or behind. Only now. He stood still and felt the ache in his body, the kind that comes from holding too much too long. He let it sit. He didn't push it away. He didn't name it. He simply allowed it to be present. When he turned back toward the car, something inside him had shifted. Not fixed, not resolved, but opened. Elena returned to the cabin as the sun climbed. She brewed tea and sat by the window. Her phone lay face down on the table. She hadn't checked it since the train ride. She knew messages would be waiting. She also knew they could wait. She thought about walking away again. How it had once been survival. How now it felt like protection. But protection can become a wall if left standing too long. She closed her eyes. Asked herself a question she'd avoided. What do I actually want? The answer came quietly. To be seen without shrinking. Daniel's phone buzzed as he crossed back into the city. A number he recognized. Harlan. Daniel pulled over and answered. I've stepped back, Daniel said before Harlan could speak. From voting rights. From oversight. I'm disclosing everything. Silence on the line. Then Harlan said, that will cost you. I know, Daniel replied. And it may not change the board's decision. I know, he said again. Another pause. This isn't about saving my position, Daniel added. It's about telling the truth without bargaining. Harlan exhaled. That's a different man than the one I first met. Daniel closed his eyes. I hope so. Elena checked her phone at noon. Missed calls. Messages. Questions. She skimmed them without answering. Then one message stopped her. Harlan. Daniel disclosed everything. Fully. No conditions. Her chest tightened. Not relief. Recognition. She walked back to the lake and stood at the edge. The water reflected the sky perfectly. She remembered a time when Daniel would have fought this outcome. Twisted it, tried to win. This choice was different. Costly. Real. Back in the city, Daniel met with a lawyer and signed more papers. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He asked questions he'd never asked before. What happens if I do nothing? What's the long view? What does accountability actually look like? The answers weren't comfortable. He accepted them anyway. That evening, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Boxes lined the walls, his life reduced to decisions. He opened a drawer and found an old notebook. Elena's handwriting filled the pages. Ideas, frameworks, notes he'd once skimmed and ignored. He sat on the floor and read every page. Slowly, carefully, as if time might bend if he paid enough attention. Elena packed to leave the cabin. Not back to the city. Not yet. She paused at the door and looked around. She felt stronger than she had days ago. Not because things were fixed. Because she'd chosen honesty over comfort. On the drive, her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I told the whole truth. She stared at the screen. Didn't respond. She needed to feel what that meant without words rushing in. Transformation doesn't arrive with speeches. It shows up in choices that hurt. In steps that cost more than they promised to return. If you've ever watched someone change when it mattered most, and wondered whether it would last, do you think people can really change when it matters most? Drop your thoughts below. Daniel received confirmation the next morning. The board accepted his disclosures. The venture would proceed without him. His role reduced. His influence gone. He read the email twice, then closed the laptop. A strange calm settled over him. Elena met Harlan later that day. Not in an office. At a small park near the water. I won't return under the same structure, she said. I need independence. Harlan nodded. You've earned it. She hesitated. There's something else. He waited. I won't be used as leverage against him, she said. Or shield. Harlan considered that. Understood. She exhaled. This was her line. Daniel took a walk through his old neighborhood. He passed the building where he and Elena had lived. The windows looked smaller now. He stood across the street and remembered carrying boxes up the stairs. Laughing, believing time would stretch forever. He felt the loss fully, and didn't turn away. Elena stopped at a grocery store on the way back. She moved through the aisles slowly, choosing simple things. Bread, fruit, coffee. Ordinary life had weighed again. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from Elena. I know what you did. Thank you for choosing truth. He read it once. Then again. He typed. I'll respect whatever you decide next. He set the phone down. Didn't wait. That night, both of them lay awake in different places. The same question circling. What now? Change had come. Not the kind that announces itself. The kind that strips you down and asks who you're willing to be without applause. They'd answered. Separately. The reckoning wasn't over. But it had done its work. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on. It's becoming someone worth meeting again. With the truth finally paid for in full and the cost of change laid bare, Daniel and Elena stand at the edge of something new. Uncertain whether their separate courage might still lead them back to each other. Spring arrived quietly. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It came in small signs. Trees budding along sidewalks, longer evenings, the soft return of warmth after months of restraint. Daniel noticed it on a Saturday morning while standing at a farmer's market near the river. He'd started coming here out of habit. No meetings, no calls, just time moving at a human pace. He held a paper cup of coffee and watched people pass. Families, couples, strangers, life unbothered by his past. He wasn't waiting for anyone. That mattered. Across town, Elena parked her car outside a community center she'd never visited before. The building was plain. Brick. A hand-painted sign announced a weekend workshop on small business planning. She smiled. This was where she felt most like herself now. Close to ideas, far from noise. She carried her bag inside and greeted the coordinator. "I'm glad you're here," the woman said. "People really listen to you." Elena nodded. "That's all I ask." Time moved forward. Weeks passed. The headlines faded. Daniel's name appeared less often. When it did, it wasn't attached to power but to accountability. He took consulting work that didn't require bravado. He listened more than he spoke. People noticed. Elena built something new, independent, grounded. She chose her projects carefully, said no often, slept better. They didn't speak. Not because of tension, because space can be a form of respect. One afternoon, Daniel received an email. Subject: Community Venture Panel, Invitation. He scanned the details. Location: a small auditorium near the river. Panelists listed: Elena Reyes. He leaned back. Read it again. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't avoidance either. It was alignment. The auditorium filled slowly. Not full, just enough. Elena sat on stage with 3 others, answering questions from local founders. Daniel sat in the back. No badge, no title, just another person listening. Elena spoke clearly. She talked about building trust before scale, about leaving room for rest, about walking away when growth demanded self-erasure. Daniel felt each word land, not as regret, as recognition. After the panel, people lingered. Daniel waited until the crowd thinned. He didn't want to interrupt. When Elena finally stepped down, she noticed him. They locked eyes. No surprise, no tension, just presence. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he replied. They stood there. The space between them felt different now. Not charged. Open. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I didn't come to be seen," he answered. "I came to listen." She nodded. "That's new." He smiled faintly. "I'm practicing." They walked outside together. The river reflected the late afternoon light. People passed them without noticing. That felt right. "I heard about your new work," Daniel said. "It suits you." She glanced at him. "I heard you stepped back." "Fully." "Yes." "Do you regret it?" He considered the question. "No," he said. "I regret how long it took." She accepted that. They sat on a low stone wall near the water. Not too close. Not far. Comfortable. "I'm not here to reopen anything," Daniel said quietly. "I just wanted to say, I see you. Fully. I didn't before." Elena looked out at the river. "That matters," she said. "More than you know." Silence settled. The good kind. "I don't know what this means," Elena said after a while. "Neither do I," Daniel replied. "And for once, I'm okay with that." She smiled. A real one. They stood to leave. No promises made. No plans formed. But something had shifted. Again. Days later, Elena found a note tucked into her mailbox. No return address. Just a simple card. "I'm learning how to show up without taking over. Thank you for teaching me what that looks like." She held it for a long moment, then placed it on her desk. Daniel started volunteering on weekends. Nothing impressive. Food drives. Resume workshops. Listening. Always listening. Their paths crossed more often after that. At events. At the river. At the same coffee shop on Main Street. Each time they spoke a little longer. Shared a little more. Let the present build without dragging the past behind it. One evening, Elena suggested dinner. Casual. No wait. They chose a small diner by the highway. Booths worn smooth by time. Menus that hadn't changed in years. They talked about ordinary things. Books. Work. Weather. They laughed. That surprised both of them. Halfway through the meal, Daniel paused. "There's something I want to say," he said. "And you don't have to answer." She waited. "I'm not the man I was," he continued. "And I won't ask you to trust that. I'll just live it." She studied him, then nodded. "That's all I'd accept." When the check came, Elena reached for it. Daniel let her. That mattered too. Outside, night settled gently. No rush. No urgency. just two people walking to their cars. At her door, Elena stopped. "I don't believe in going backward," she said. "I don't either," Daniel replied. She met his eyes. "But I do believe in choosing forward," she added. He breathed in. "So do I." They didn't kiss. Not yet. They hugged. Simple. Human. Weeks later, they stood together at a community event near the river. Not as a statement. Not as a reunion headline. Just together. People greeted Elena warmly. Some recognized Daniel. No one whispered. He reached for her hand. She let him. No hesitation. No fear. Love didn't arrive as a rush. Settled in. Earned. Quiet. Lasting. There are stories that ask you to believe in grand gestures. And there are stories like this where change happens in small, costly choices made without an audience. If you've stayed with this story, you understand why some endings aren't loud. They're honest. And choosing to follow journeys like this to the end isn't just support. It's a reflection of believing that growth, accountability, and love are worth witnessing. They walked along the river as the sun dipped low. Daniel squeezed Elena's hand. Not possessive. Present. She leaned into him. Just slightly. Enough. Some people are worth the wait. Not because they come back the same, but because they return changed. Do you believe some people are worth the wait? Drop a heart in the comments if this story hit you. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.